And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
If you've watched my reviews at all, you'll know that there is a certain amount of, as I play these reviews, I like party games that invoke discussion. Whether that discussion turn into a heated argument, as long as it stays friendly, but still that a passionate argument maybe is what I should say. One that people say, come on now, this game, Such a Thing from Valley Games, is most definitely a game that is going to provoke discussion. There's actually, what does the rulebook say? I think there's 8 different games in here. Speed variant, chain variant, war, poker, draft. I'm just going to talk about the main game itself, the chain game it's called. But there are various games that you can play with these cards, but you're basically trying to find such a thing. Let's take a closer look at the cards and I'll explain the game briefly to you. Okay, Such a Thing comes with a huge deck of cards. There's 214 different cards, and each of these talks about a thing. Is there such a thing that has either a lens, a screen, or an eye? Is there such a thing that is applicable for military purposes? Is fascinating to men? Would be quite a surprise in China. Usually stands with 4 points of contact on the floor. Has a hole where a coin can be inserted and on the other side taken out again. Is long and thin. So there's plenty of these cards in the game, and a player is dealt 9 of these cards to start their hand out with in this the chain game. One card is turned over so that everyone can see it. So let's say, for example, this is the starting card. I would be glad to have such a thing in the desert. Now, everybody can think of plenty of things that they could think of to be glad to have in the desert. I could think of water, for instance, having that, or a canteen, or a jeep, or a jet. All kinds of things that I would want to have in the middle of the desert. So the first player to go, they have to play another card on next to it. So let's say the next card they play is makes a distinct sounds either on its own or with normal use. So now they have to have in their head some idea of something that matches both I would be glad to have it in the desert and makes distinct sounds either on its own or with normal use. The next player then has to either call them or add another card. When they call them, they're basically saying, I don't think you can think of something that you'd be glad to have in the desert and that makes distinct sounds either on its own or with normal use. But I could easily think of something that matches that, so the next person puts down something. Can be smelled. Okay, so now they're saying there is something that they'd be glad to have in the desert, makes distinct sounds, and can be smelled. The next person then has a choice. Are they going to call them or play another card? So they play this one. Requires trained experts to maintain it. And so now they have to match all those things, or call the next person. Is totally inappropriate for a wedding gift. Okay, at this point, the next person would call them, and they would say, what matches all those things? And so let's say the person says, a camel. We say, okay, would you be glad to have a camel in the desert? Sure. Does it make distinct sounds? Well, camels have that weird sound that they make. Yeah, sure. Can they be smelled? Oh, there are stories of the smelling of camels. Does it require trained experts to maintain it? Well, yeah, not anyone can just jump on a camel and go. Is totally inappropriate for a wedding gift? Well, and this is where the debate would start. Well, if you were in Saudi Arabia, this would be a fantastic wedding gift. And so on and so forth, until people decide via majority vote whether or not the camel meets these requirements or not. But let's say the next card usually only gets used once or twice. At this point, it'd be pretty obvious that there's nothing that meets all those requirements, at least nothing I can think of right now. And so the person who called them wins, or the person who is called on wins. Let's say they have challenged this person. The challenging person who is challenged can't name anything, then they have to draw 3 cards and add them to their hand. But if you challenge somebody and they can name something using all these cards, then you draw 3 cards and put them in your hand. And basically you are trying to get rid of all the cards in your hand. Now this could take forever, it could take a short time, but either way, eventually everyone's going to get rid of the cards from their hand. The game is fun, and like I said, I love the fact that it encourages discussion, and it's neat that they have different variations. There's a few cards in deck, poker cards. These are used in the poker variant, and basically in that sense, it's almost like Texas Hold'em, where a few cards in the middle, you have cards in your hand. Can you think of something that matches? but you can place a poker card down on top of something that you don't want to have in your set. A speed variant where you're trying to name stuff that meets these requirements as quickly as you can. They've done an excellent job with, like I said, 214 different cards of such a thing. This is a great deal of variety, and I'm sure you could think of your own variants for the game, but having several of them here in the book itself does make a lot of fun. This is a good party game. It's one that's going to be best with adults. I found that teenagers, they have a harder time with it. After 2 or 3 cards, such a thing for some reason seems to flit from their mind. They can't even think of anything, and so they're challenging each other, and the challenger almost always wins. I like playing with adults mostly because people will surely drag something out, and if you play with people who are creative and they can explain in a story why such a thing is possible, can this be offered by a bachelor to the object of his affection? Does this weigh the same as a hiking boot? Well, how much does a hiking boot weigh anyway? Some people aren't going to like this because it doesn't have any definitiveness about it, because you're going to have to argue and maybe what exactly does that mean, and oh, come on now, that's not true type things that are going to come forth. But I think it's fun, it's funny, it doesn't work in every situation or with every group, but if I have a group that's very creative, this is certainly a good party game to bring out. There is such a thing.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.